Greetings, everybody. Keith here. Hoping everybody's having a good day, enjoying life, living life, loving life. I want to thank Norm. Thanks for the attempt. We're always glad to have you up when you can make it. So appreciate that. And we've got Paul and John with us so far tonight. How you doing tonight, brothers?
I'm doing good, Keith. Thanks for asking.
Awesome, brother. Thank you all.
Greetings. And we have John LaCrone with us again tonight, folks. Appreciate you coming tonight. How you doing, brother?
Good. How about yourself, my friend?
We are getting better and better. The awareness is growing, and I think it's going to be a tremendous new season here. So I hope 2024 brings everybody a greater endeavor. As you know, we've been talking about this credit stuff lately. And the video I'm going to bring tonight is again from Williams, Brandon Joe, in regards to some plates that he's been going through. And it's going to show a progression of his knowledge as he went through the system and recognized different jurisdictions. And now he's using the upper jurisdiction through the DOT as a diplomatic consular. So we're going to take a look at that video. But before we get into it, I do want to bring up a scripture real quick as it relates to these the people that we're dealing with along the way of trying to correct these records and stuff, and realizing that they are already our bondmaids and bond servants, as it says in Scripture. So let's take a look. And this again is in Leviticus 25, and it's verse 44. And it says, both thy bondmen and thy bondmaids, which thou shalt have, shall be of the heathen that are round about you. Of them shall ye buy bondmaids and bondmen and bondmaids. Now, people confuse this with slavery, and what it's actually talking about here is indentured servitude. In other words, that buying part means you're paying them to do that job. It is not illegal. It is not unlawful. It's just knowing who you are and that you don't belong in that administrative system, but rather the prophet unto the nations, thereby allowing the ability to correct those records that they are misinterpreting. And of course, this is just my opinion. So if
Keith,
anybody wants...
What is that verse again?
Leviticus 25, verse 44.
Thank you.
And so the next one I want to go into, if you saw yesterday morning's video, it's actually early afternoon, the mirror of pollution. And if you watch that video, it's about 35-minute video talking about how we are indoctrinated in this system by mom signing a certain document without making a certain declaration. And so what I'm going to extend upon that one tonight is 26 U.S. Code 1031. And in the financial industry, these are known as 1031 exchanges. You can look this up in your research engine. Just put in 1031 exchange, and it will tell you about these exchanges. And it says exchange of real property held for productive use or investment. Again, that first documentation is an investment, and that's what they're using it for, is their production. This is the gross domestic products of the United States derived off of your sweat, labor, equity. You become a slave, a servitude slave to that system without knowing it. Once you know it, you can correct the records and ascend above it.
But that's separate from being a consumer, right, Keith?
Correct. A consumer is one involved in waste and abuse.
Well, a consumer, as far as what I realize things to be, is that, you know, we're allotted to live according to the U.S. Constitution to a certain degree of of monies, I guess. And I realize that there is no money, so it's kind of hard to involve the Constitution in this. But there seems to be like a mishap between the legal system and what's lawful. And it's just it's a difficult thing, I think, for most people to wrap their minds around the difference between private and public.
Absolutely. And that's the thing about that enumeration at birth. When mom signs that document, there's supposed to be a separate declaration so that the two are distinguished as different. And so when you don't recognize that during that birth process, you end up with a birth of a man that was discharged from his mother's waters and took his first breath, wherein man became a living soul. But then a record is entered saying that he's a man. So it was never corrected.
The record is according to the afterbirth of the man that was born out of his mother's waters. The afterbirth, I believe.
That's a total belief, and I can understand where you get that. But again, the record doesn't ever reflect the afterbirth. It reflects the legal presumption of a legal entity being founded in a foundling hospital that is in a stage of development. That development is never corrected for its proper usage in a usufruct system. Greetings, Henry. How you doing tonight, brother?
Great. Good to hear you. Bless you.
Good to see you up here. I believe we're friends on Facebook.
Yes, sir. I follow you in, Derek.
Awesome. Great to have you. And John, I saw you kind of itching to at the bit there to say something. What do you got on your mind with that Constitution thing?
It's amazing how you and I were thinking of the same word. The word I just got through looking up was usufruct. The right to enjoy the use and advantages of another's property short of the destruction or waste of its substance. Usufruct. So when you said that, I just started busting out laughing inside.
And that's the consumer, the waste and abuse. Okay, that's the fictional consumer. You are not the consumer, and that consumer is a thrift trust. What is a thrift spend or a spendthrift? Someone who wastes their estate.
A taxpayer.
The prodigal son. He went out and wasted his estate, and then he had to indenture himself for 7 years to make the money to get back to his father, wherein he re-inherited that same estate.
And one of the things that you're looking at when you take a step back and see how they've built this system, you know, they call us children. You can call them a child, and that, of course, means a ward of the state. And by their definition, that can be an adult in their 40s, 50s, 60s, or 70s. It's anybody who hasn't come forward to make their claim against their estate. So they consider themselves to be your ward and handling your affairs, which is why you have to have an attorney represent you, represent you. And
right.
again, it's all fraud.
Yeah, and that's again based on that word ward, and we hear about awards and rewards, and most people forget about the steward. So let's break it down. A ward of the state versus a steward of God in his house, intent. And that S-T-E, means instead. It means standing. So you are either a standing ward or a ward of the state that has no standing.
And understand.
Correct. And I try my best not to use that term unless I'm understanding God and his message. Otherwise, I do my best to comprehend what is in this world before me. Comprehend. Hand meaning hand. Pre meaning what came before. And con meaning with. With what came before his hand. The right hand of his of our Creator, who wrote his word with his index finger on our heart, not in our mind. To comprehend, we have to match our thoughts with our heart, not with somebody else's words. So let's get back to this 26 U.S. code thing real quick for exchange of real property held, which is held by the county registrar, wherein that is the real property that was originally created with mom at a signature as an informant. So it was in form of a person, and again, there was no opposite or equalizing declaration that in spirit he will follow the manuals if it is available and possible. But if it's not for possible for his spirit to follow because it is a sin, then he cannot do it, and the system will recognize that.
Can I ask a question about that?
Sure.
So on the original birth registration form, as far as my position stands, and from what I've been able to see from my own experience, is that on that form, it was informant/mother. So what you're saying is that there hasn't been a distinguishment between the informant and the mother being the grantor of her property's trust indenture.
Correct.
Okay.
Let me interject a couple quick points here since we are talking about the fraud of the birth certificate. First of all, realize something. They are very specific. Even when the woman is married, they tell her to use her maiden name. Now, why is that, you might ask? The actual reason is this: because bastards cannot inherit property. That's fact number one. Now, fact number two, they have not informed the woman that she has given up certain rights. Now, there's a lot of things that go on behind the scene, but from their perspective, she's done a special manufacturing process and has delivered through the waters a maritime admiralty product. Okay. And it's simply, she's there acting as the ship, making a delivery and sitting there. And this is the paper that says what the delivery was. Now, one other thing is they specifically ask the woman, would you like your son or your daughter to be put into the record, on the public record, and be put in the local paper? And of course, every mom and dad says, yeah, I want all my friends and neighbors to know we have a bouncing little boy or girl. And, you know, that's all exciting. But here's what it is. That completes the fraud in the sense that they now have shown that there is a brand new corporation that has been brought in and it is now on the public record. So that's something else to consider. Now,
unless the family does it separately and puts that record into a paper and establishes it on their own.
Correct. And you used another good term there. Right. And you used another good term there, John, manufactured. Okay, this means that's a manufacturer's certificate of origin. It's the same damn thing. If you guys understand a thesaurus versus a dictionary, you'll see that the dictionary creates ambiguity with the meaning. It's creating different letters that they can use in the law or at law for what's intended. And that's a total ambiguity of what the true intent is. And that's that steward versus a ward of the state, using state language, state code, state laws, state this. And then what are they asking you for? They're asking you for a statement. That's the mentality of your state of being.
A witness.
No, everybody goes in there, and I did it for many years too, defendant. That's an abstract noun. It has no reality to it at all. I am a concrete noun, if anything, or I am not the concrete noun. I am described by a concrete noun, which means you can touch me, taste me, feel me, or hear me, see me, and whatnot. They're physical attributes.
Yeah, keep one other thing. You know, it's also a title. Defendant, taxpayer, subject, anything that they choose. They never, ever, ever call you a man or woman. And again, that is why, because they don't want a man or woman in their kangaroo courts for a reason. Men and women have rights, but a subject doesn't have rights. A victim doesn't have rights. This is the whole system. It's all again built on that legalese fraud, which is why they have to have a legalese book that keeps changing every few years. They're up to what, 11 or 12 by now, I think. And this is ridiculous. And it's all been a slow, steady drip, drip, drip of changing terms very slowly, very casually, where people didn't realize what was taking place. And again, we forget something very important. Back in the early 1980s, most lawyers, and there's a very big difference between the word lawyer and attorney, and I'll explain that in a minute. Most lawyers were not bar attorneys. Now, it was somewhere around 80, 81, 82 time frame that they started saying, hey, we want everybody to be a bar attorney. Why? Because they were bringing in all this foreign legalese garbage from overseas. And that had to be a part of it. So now all of a sudden, all these attorneys ended up being attorneys and lawyers at the same time. But as they steadily died off and the new people coming on board were strictly attorneys. Now, to clarify what those two words mean, attorney, that is someone simply there for the purpose of being an interpreter. More importantly, it took a very old book on maritime law, and it means international shipping clerk. An international shipping clerk. Now, a lawyer is very different. A lawyer is one that is learned in the law. And again, I tell everybody, law is very simple. It is 3 little words, 8 little letters. Do no harm. Everything else is contract, and usually it's contract using legalese as a fraud and a baseline for fraud.
Yep. And if you guys recognize the Boston Tea Party, it was because of the fact that American colonists were trying to make their own tea, but still being taxed on it. And they, in order to tax them back in that time, they had to ship it all over to England to have it all weighed and monitored, and then have a tax stamp put on it, and then bring it back. That was a hefty expense. So to cut that expense to pay such a tax, they threw the Tea Party. Well, what we have today is a tax system that still pays taxes to the royal houses. It's still the same thing. It never changed. You've only been duped. The Civil War, Congress walked out, sin die, and instead of having a republic for the Americans, we now have a corporate entity known as the United States operating for the United States of America, and that's only a corporate office until enough people stand up and start taking over those offices, not for compensation, but out of good faith only. Well, that's how this country started.
It's out of the office of representing one's own self.
Yes, absolutely. So let's continue on with this definition here real quick. Non-recognition of gain or loss from exchanges solely in kind. Very specific wording. Look at this wording, folks. Non-recognition. So something was cognized, but now there's a non-recognition. No gain or loss shall be recognized on the exchange of real property held for productive use in a trade or business, which is the performance of public office or performance of the functions of public office. And if you look like you're acting in the function of public office, such as signing official documents, that is such a thing as a presumption. Or for investment, if such real property exchange solely for real property of like kind, which is to be held either for productive use in a trade or business or for investment. That's the exchange. Mom exchanged that document by giving it away without a proper declaration and qualifying the statement. So
well, we can blame mom. We can blame mom all we want, but we continue it. That's the problem.
Right. Once you realize what's wrong, and I'm giving you information. So, and again, do not believe me. Do not believe any people on this panel. Do not believe your neighbor. Do not believe the government. Do not, for crying out loud, believe your mother. Do your research so you know. Quit the believing shit. Then it says, requirement that property be identified. Property is what is identified, not people. And again, it's the individual's name and number that identify the record. The record is the property. So again, that first statement that Mom made is property, real property that is held for productive use or investment. And again, if you look at that graph that I showed you about the vital statistics jurisdiction, it shows you that's what they're doing with it. They're using it for investments. Requirement that property be identified and that exchange be completed not more than 180 days after transfer of exchange property. So they consider at 180 days, if you haven't made another declaration in regards to that, it is abandoned and the exchange has been made. You have to go in and correct that. There's no value on it, yet they're extending value on it based on a credit system. You get the opportunity, again, if you know, to go back and put your value on it. For purposes of this subsection, any property received by the taxpayer, that court registrar is the taxpayer. The county clerk is the taxpayer. The county commissioner is the taxpayer. The administrative law judge is the taxpayer. Those are ad hominems in person, and those are titles like John said. And you're using them the same manner by that identification. That's a taxpayer. When that name is assigned a social security number, it is a tax identification number, a taxpayer identification number. It's saying the individual is a taxpayer. If you haven't received anything, then you don't have property of like kind. Such property is not identified as property to be received in the exchange on or before the day, which is 45 days after the date on which the taxpayer transfers the property, relinquished in the exchange. Again, reaffirming what I just said. If they don't have a correction or a separate declaration showing the two distinct different entities, then there's not going to be any of it. It's all a presumption.
Hey, Keith, one thing that is just glaringly obvious to me. Notice how they keep saying taxpayer and they're not saying property owner. Again,
Correct.
so important. People need to get this.
Yep. Absolutely. Let me see here. I think somebody's complaining that I need to turn my mic up.
Nope, just to keep the wolves away.
It says my mic is full volume. Sorry. Okay, so as we continue on, such property is received after the earlier of the day, which is 180 days after the date on which the taxpayer transfers the property relinquished in the exchange, or the due date determined with regard to extension. Remember, it's all about extension of credit, not money. And that's what they're talking about. They have to give mom credit for that document. You're the inheritor under the legacy. And again, you have to claim the name of the Father which art in heaven, for there is but one Father which art in heaven. The other one is a false father, and that's what the record shows. So despite your lineage or anything, you plead the blood of Christ. Just sanguis and just sole. For the transfers return of the tax imposed. Tax imposed. Now, if tax is a gift, then why is it imposed? Imposed means forced. Imposed means an imposition, the deposition, the disposition. That is what happens at birth, that you are dispositioned in character, and that is an imposition. I'm posed. I'm posed as an imposter. Article
Thank God
1.
for the U.S. Constitution.
I was just going to say Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1. Congress has the authority to lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises. Are you an imposter? An imposter?
Imposter.
Exactly. Everything you post goes to an accounting of the events. Everything
False
is
witness.
postal. Yep, everything is postal. By this chapter, for the taxable year in which the transfer of the relinquished property occurs, not every year after that. Not every year after that. Gain from exchange is not solely in kind. Say that again. Say that again, please.
I think it was somebody just talking in the background.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So gain from exchange is not solely in kind. So when you get indoctrinated to act in person, it is not solely in kind anymore, ever, until you correct it. He's no respecter of persons. If an exchange would be within the provisions of subsection A of section 1035A, of section 1036A, or of section 1037A, if it were not for the fact that the property received in exchange consists not only of property permitted by such provisions to be received without the recognition of gain, that's the abandonment. You don't get a recognition of gain. It's abandoned, so it's a gift to them that they then turn around and create a taxpayer and now impose anything that is actually a gift. But also of other property or money. Is that telling you that property is a type of, or money is a type of property, and that property is a type of money? Then
Yes.
the gain, exactly. Then the gain, if any, to the recipient shall be recognized. So they're recognizing their gain, but they're not recognizing any gain for the one that abandoned it, because they abandon it. But in an
Barely
amount,
so.
but in an amount not in excess of the sum of money and fair market value of such other property. If that document had no value on it, then what is the fair market value? See the inconsistency?
So are we to give it that fair market value? Like, where does that come from?
To be fair, it has been held to my detriment as a defendant. Again, if you go back to last night's video, we talked about that, where the plaintiff is deemed to have a receiving, but the detriment goes to the defendant. And we saw on the form that the defendant is actually a creditor. So they're putting things to the detriment of the creditor. So to be fair, since I'm known as the creditor, or my person is known as the creditor, it's been held to my detriment. How is that so? We need to correct the record.
Not only that, Keith, but we can't, at that point, no longer act the part of a beneficiary, because then we would know what the overall value of that is. And as a beneficiary, we're not supposed to know any of that.
Well, actually, we can, but again, I want to help correct the terms here. We are the benefactor. Mom was the manufacturer. We're the only ones that can bring the facts. The beneficiary is the record. Same with trustor. Trustor is the one that creates and makes, so he is like a creator. Trustor. The trustee is the fictional entity named in the trust as trustee. Grantor is the one that grants the grantee right to the person. Everything-
So wouldn't that be our person?
The
Like
gra-
our flesh and blood person? Wouldn't
our
it
flesh,
be the
our flesh and blood being is the benefactor. The person created in image and likeness as a legal fiction is the beneficiary. The benefactor, look it up, put in your search engine, benefactor versus beneficiary. And the first thing that pops up will tell you the benefactor is the one that gives to the beneficiary. Now, if it's the grantor that gives, then the benefactor and the grantor are one in the same.
And don't I give to my body? Don't I give nutrients and chemical, the right chemical processes through my right mind, a beneficiary aspect to my being, my body?
Correct. That would be a much better statement, because it's not, again, Matthew Cooper puts down, it's not flesh and blood person. The person is a mask. It's the covering. It's the clothes that we're invested in, because if we were truly under the full armor of God, we would all be able to say, fuck the government. I'm running around naked.
Yeah, bravo.
So, loss from exchange is not solely in kind. If an exchange, oops, we already did that. Basis. If property was acquired, this is the only way they can do it. It's Federal Acquisitions Regulations, 48 CFR 5212-5. Contract terms and conditions required to implement statutes or executive orders - commercial items. There must be a contract. Guess what? Mom signed as informant, but down below, 2 contracting officers contracted between themselves to keep and hold those records in abeyance for the benefactor when he comes of age and makes a claim to that property. It never happens because nobody's been taught to do so. On an exchange described in this section 1035, 1036, 1037, then the basis, the foundation, shall be the same as that of property exchanged, decreased in the amount of any money received by the taxpayer, and increased in the amount of gain or decreased in the amount of loss to the taxpayer that was recognized on such exchange. Does that sound like it's supposed to balance out?
By the clerk?
Absolutely. But it's saying taxpayer.
The clerk.
Both parties. Both parties in any contract is a taxpayer. Let me change that. Both parties in these public contracts are considered taxpayers.
One in the same.
If property so acquired consisted in part of the type of property permitted in this section 1035, 1036, 1037, to be received without the recognition of gain or loss, that's the equal exchange. So if I give you $500 for a car, and it is considered by both parties that the car is the same value, then there is a received without recognition of gain or loss by both parties and in part of the other party. The basis provided in this subsection shall be allocated between the parties other than money received, and for purpose of the allocation, there shall be assigned to such other party an amount equivalent to its fair market value at the date of exchange.
Now, Keith, wouldn't that be a receipt or a negotiable instrument?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Again,
Okay.
in public
Good.
contracting.
Mm-hmm.
On the private side, I can exchange that private conveyance for $500 worth of vegetables for my garden if I wanted to. Now, in that exchange agreement, I can receive the car now in April, and then when my crop is harvested, if it's agreeable and we trust each other enough in that agreement and have faith in each other, then when that harvest comes, I must fulfill the obligation that I intended to in the beginning.
So ultimately, what we're dealing with is a third-party intervener that deals with paper to distinguish between what's equal between the two parties, and it's their invested interest, to delegate all that in our ignorance that we should be delegating.
Yep, absolutely. And
Right.
that's what we do when mom signs over the estate without making a separate declaration at enumeration at birth. And by the time we become age of majority, we haven't learned this stuff. So instead of taking over that estate and administrating or administering it ourselves, we sign up the SS5, and that's a contract to have the state administer the estate and a claim that we're incompetent to do so.
Using paper as
Yep.
money.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You look at most people, and they will not even take the time to figure out some of the most basic things. One point we always want to make with people is everything, and I do mean everything, is a contract. It
Trust.
can be that also. When we think of contracting, when you say a trust, yeah, there could be financial, quote unquote, benefits to something like that. But there can also be an exchange of energy, like friendships. Okay. There's no quote unquote trust involved, although there would be a different form of trust. Like I trust Keith over here, and I'm sure Keith trusts me for the most part when we sit here and have conversations with one another about what's going on behind the scenes. Now, one other point to make, if you think about a couple different details that you're seeing in this, how do you determine a fair market value of nothing? See, that's critical because no debt can be paid. It can only be discharged. And Federal Reserve notes are negotiable debt instruments. They are not money. They do not pay off a debt because debt cannot pay off a debt. They can only discharge the debt, which is what happens when somebody accepts for value the Federal Reserve note in exchange for something real and tangible. That's critically important.
Yeah, they've got.
Guys.
It can only be at the
They're
fair
gonna
market
register
value
all-
of what it requires that people need to live every day, and to do their business and do their thing. And what is that? That's all in accordance to each one of us individually. And do we shortchange ourselves? Do we hyperextend ourselves? What's that medium? And I think that generally that's the main issue on moving forward with stating anything. What is that number? What is that hypothetical number?
SEC agreements, I've seen a couple of them with $100 billion.
Yeah, and who's to say that that's absurd?
The SEC didn't. They accepted it, and you can look them up. I've showed them on some of my videos before. They're there, and they're valid.
Is it in accordance to how we write up our paperwork and how we present ourselves and allow others to speak their nonsensical piece,
Correct,
so to speak?
Right. When the corporate entities are dealing with their with the SEC and they want to put things out in the public for sale, they want to sell stock certificates and stuff. That's called an IPO, initial public offering. Private people do not do those. Private people do a private placement as set. It is going to be set here. It's going to be removed from a general deposit and placed in a special deposit, a private placement, as set. And you are the ones making that statement. No one else can do it for you. So
Very well said.
So the next one says, for purposes of this section, 1035, 1036, whereas part of the consideration, again, this is with side ration. That's a military term. All contracts are based on military fiat currency because, again, this is a United States corporation and it is a military regime, whereas the people retain the power of militia. They are two different things. To the taxpayer, another party to the exchange assumed a liability of the taxpayer. Such assumption shall be considered as money received by the taxpayer on the exchange. As long as you keep assuming the liabilities of the performance of function of public office, signing those official documents, that will be the exchange, and they will use it against you every last time.
Until we're able to transfer that obligation onto another.
Correct. And that's merely, again, you're not transferring the liability on anybody, actually. What you're doing
obligation to pay.
Right. You're recognizing the liability in the record, leaving it in the record. Therefore, the only thing that needs to be corrected is the record. Once that is done, it removes liability against anybody, wherein no person shall be held liable in any court. It's removing it out of the court system. That general deposit. That's what that document was done at the county registrar. It's a public made general deposit. You have to remove that and make a special deposit by placing its value to it and letting them know you have arrived.
And that record is the birth record, right, Keith?
Correct.
Okay.
Application to certain partnerships. This is very important. It was not a certain partnership. Again, it was presumed. So again, it's not a matter of disclaiming anything. That United States citizenship is valid, but it is not you. It is your property, and you get to administrate or execute it, whatever you want to do, direct it. Okay? So you're in conference with the laws of the United States, in amnesty. You are not an enemy of the state. In fact, you are the ally of the United States, because the United States was created for your benefit.
But we're only as the beneficial interest title holder to that, not the actual title holder of it. So we share it.
As the principal, and the United States has an obligation on that interest. It never says interest on anything but interest. It doesn't say interest on the obligation, it doesn't say interest on the debt, it doesn't say interest on the debt. Credit. It doesn't say interest on anything, just interest. In the interest of the United States, on the account of the United States, and for the person making the same, so that no person shall be held liable in any court for variances from categorical pre-treatment standards that are fundamentally different in nature from the beginning. An interest in a partnership. This is the partnership. They conferred a nationality of a corporate citizenship. You can accept it. You don't have to deny it. And that acceptance can only be done by recognizing it for what it really is. It is not you. It is a record. So correct the record. This is a matter of salvation through resurrection and merging with a new name.
Keith, let me interject one quick point here. What you're seeing, ladies and gentlemen, is you're seeing a public-private partnership at your level. It goes all the way down to you. You don't realize that you have a partnership. You know, we explained that with the marriage contract. When you bring the state in, they became the third party to your marriage contract with the party that you chose to bond with, and that is, of course, a legal term for a business enterprise between two parties that may bear fruit in the form of young people, which is, again, what the hopes and dreams of the parties that should not be hoped for, because that, of course, produces another asset creation thing for them in their paperwork as an asset. Now, any property, and I do mean any property that is on the public record, is considered to be a part of the corporate trust, whether that's the United States corporation, the state of, county of, city of, whatever that, it becomes a part of their books. Okay. And you have done a public-private partnership with these entities when you registered Regis, King, tar, black oily substance that binds, and of your own free will you did this. Now, they didn't tell you that, of course, once you did this, that now you're under their rules and regulations. That's why you have to have certain things and pay that taxes on your car every year and on your property every year. They don't sit there and say, you know, you may not want to register this as commercial property or residential property. You may want to register this as private property. But again, they're not going to.
You gave them title. You gave them title. When you registered it and you didn't differentiate, you gave them the title of it.
That is correct.
Absolutely. And that's why I go about that. I've done a couple videos on the certification of title as false for motor vehicles, because I don't know a single one that has ever made a handwritten statement of intent to use the motor vehicle at least 50% of its use for the performance of functions of public office, trade, or business.
To the Internal Revenue Service, right, Keith?
Right. And then turned around and kept track of all the mileage or hours with all of the orders and products and shipment places and dates and all that. Nobody's ever done that, and they don't have any records of it unless you have a CDL, and those records are kept by the company and the driver.
Wouldn't that be a trust lug?
Yes, you're involving a third party. Again, it's in a contract and trust, like you mentioned earlier.
What they do that? What does that matter? That's what they fucking do.
So they can calculate.
That's right.
Yep.
They're right.
Yep. We have to maintain our own record.
Well, they get that for fucking registrations and sales, and it shows the fucking odometer.
Yep, and that's a very important part of their system. But again, that's because people are willing to live under this presumption. And that's just because people are willing to live under a presumption. So again, I remind you, don't believe me. Don't believe the neighbor. Don't believe John, Henry, Paul, John. Don't believe the government. Don't, for crying out loud, believe your mother. Do your research. Do your research so you know.
Well, so thank you, Keith. I want to thank you personally, because I've followed along with you for quite a while now. This is the first time that I've actually been a participant on one of your live podcasts, but I want to say that thank you, brother. Thank you for all the due diligence that you've done. You've raised, I think, many of our consciousness to the next level, although I think that there's bits and pieces that I would like to have answered, and I'm willing to invest my time to take part in more of these live calls to kind of give insight so that not only I can better understand, but those that are around this kind of information can also use their brains and their intellect to get a better scope of it all, because it is very deep. It's like a rabbit hole, and if we get too caught up in the basics of that rabbit hole, we'll never go beyond and excel beyond overcoming the hurdles necessary to get beyond these issues. So I thank you, brother, for your due diligence. Continue on.
Yeah, and just so everybody knows, all glory goes to him. I do appreciate it. And on that note, hit that like, share, and subscribe button, folks. There's a PayPal link down there for anybody who wants to share some love, too. I always appreciate it. So let's go on to the next part. That partnership. For purposes of this section, in interest in a partnership, which has in effect a valid election under Section 761A to be excluded from the application of all subchapter K shall be treated as an interest in each of the assets of such partnership and not as an interest in the partnership itself. So there's a problem where we disassociated from the United States, and I did this myself in the beginning of my research, wanting to go after them and saying, fuck you, I'm not a United States citizen, da-da-da-da, didn't really know what was going on. Now I understand, again, folks, all contracts have the elements of a peace treaty at the lowest level. Like John said, this partnership reaches the lowest level, and if you want equity, you got to bring equity. Thus, if you want peace, you got to bring peace.
And you don't want to get rid of your principal either.
Correct. So you gotta place the interest yourself in the partnership, because their interest is only in the assets. That's the only way they live. But once you show an interest in the partnership and point out the obligations they have to you, if you can express it right, I guarantee you, they will bow down and kiss your feet. They will recognize not that they're heathens, but that they're servitude bondsmen and bondsmaids. They're getting paid for this, and you're not.
I believe you.
They have to have an equal consideration.
Mhm.
Another thing that people need to know about is regards to a contract. Listen carefully, because I'm about to teach you something if you don't know these things. From what I like to refer to as the criminal cabal's angle, they do what is called an offer and acceptance. That is their contracting. Now, a valid contract will have 4 elements. Full disclosure means everybody knows everything about everything. A meeting of the minds. Everybody agrees to every little detail. Everybody gets it. There's nothing being hidden. Mutual consideration. Everybody gets something out of the deal. And finally, the autographs. Men and women have autographs or signatures. Corporate presidents have signatures, sign here, of all contracting parties. And then you have to break it down from there. Can a fiction do any of the above things? No, they cannot. Now, they can have their attorneys do it. And again, what is an attorney? It's someone who works for the fiction because it's incapable of doing it itself.
Yeah, they're prostitutes.
Right.
That too.
Like I said, you are the benefactor, and the beneficiary is in the paper. The paper can't do anything. You have to. So let's continue on. Special rules for exchanges between related persons. So your person is a relator to mom's person, the signatures. Not mom herself, not her physical hand, but the signature that ended up on the paper for the persons named in the paper. And remember again, special, anytime you see special, that means literally it means private. So you're taking it out of the general deposit, which is public. That's why they call it general public. And you're putting it as a placement in a special deposit, a private deposit. In general, a taxpayer exchanges property with a related person, the beneficiary and benefactor, trustor and trustee, grantor and grantee, the grantee, trustee, beneficiary, anything like that that ends with an E is the person, the secretary.
What do you mean by the person, Keith? Like the taxpayer person?
The fiction in any sense,
yes.
Whether it be a taxpayer, a resident, a tenant, an occupant. There is non-recognition of gain or loss to the taxpayer under this section with respect to the exchange of such property, determined without regard to this subsection, and before the date 2 years after the date of the last transfer, which was part of such exchange, if the related person disposes of such property, or the taxpayer disposes of the property received in exchange from the related person, which was of like kind to the property transferred by the taxpayer. So again, that taxpayer is the person and can't really transfer property, but the only thing they transfer is paperwork. Okay.
Well, they can't even do that. They can't even transfer paperwork without the Christ individual.
Correct. Again, so the transfer is made on behalf of the person, but that person can't have anything but paperwork. It can't physically own property, despite what those laws, codes, and everything say. The land shall not be sold forever, for it is mine. And everything they get from this world, all material things that are manufactured, are just facts by a man and not actual ownership. Again, we are stewards in his house, and we have to live by intent.
The Christ individual.
Yep. There shall be no recognition of gain or loss under this section to the taxpayer with respect to such exchange. So again, when they say that the taxpayer is the owner, they can't receive such things as a house or a car or anything like that. Okay? Except that any gain or loss recognized by the taxpayer by reason of this subsection shall be taken into account. Not into reality, but into account as of the date on which the disposition referred to in subparagraph C occurs. The disposition. You are originally posed and have standing as the living being. And the disposition is that you believe still, not everybody, of course, but most people still believe they are the person, and that is a disposition. Just by giving a name and believing that your name is a disposition. This is why when they ask me for ID, sorry, I don't have such thing. Well, what's your name? I don't have a name either. The name is that of the person. The name and number identifies the record.
And the address.
The name that you're thinking of is not a name to me. That's what my mom and dad called me. That's a verbal action. Okay? Mom and dad didn't write the name down and then hand me a piece of paper with instructions. They told me what to do by calling my name. And that's again a verbal thing, because then I reacted with a verbal action by going to them. The verbal calling.
Okay, let me interject a couple quick points, Keith. Something interesting that I just found a couple days ago. The story of Rumpelstiltskin. I basically was looked into that, and don't ask me how I got there, but I stumbled across it. And one of the things that it talked about was Rumpelstiltskin had made this contract with this woman so that she could produce the gold, so that she could give the gold so that good things would happen to her and she wouldn't end up having bad things happen to her. But the final deal was giving up a kid. Well, when she gave birth and, wanted to refuse to give the young individual over to Rumpelstiltskin, he says, well, I'll give you a couple days to come up with my name. And, she started getting into panic mode because she didn't know what his name was. And long story short, she ended up going there and finding out, listening to him singing, and he said his name in the song. So she knew it. And the next day she told him his name, and the rest, as they say, is history. Made him quite upset about it. And of course, she got to keep her young one. But here's the thing, and they pointed it out in the Rumpelstiltskin commentary. They said that knowledge of the name gave you control over the thing or the person. Okay. Now, for people that don't know what to do when they are of their own non-free will, because otherwise bad things will happen to them, drug in front of a black robe and says, looking for John Leckrone, for an example. Okay. You don't go up there and say, yeah, that's me. No. You go up there and I am here to settle the matter. You don't give him. Now you can say, what I do is I turn around, I can say, you can refer to me as John and I'm here to settle the matter. Okay. Because, you know, there are very bad things will happen to you if you don't, and you just walk out and they decide to send their goons after you, and then you really got some issues. But settling the matter is critical because that's all they're there for. Remember, these black robes are nothing more than balancing the books. They're bankers. Never forget that. That bench means bank. They are just accountants. They're just there doing what they do. Now, I call it maritime admiralty, constructive contract, and racketeering, fraud, kangaroo court, star chambers, but that's beside the point.
Nisi Prius.
And we're bankers too.
That is correct. But I want to, since you hit that subject, let me interject one other thing. It is your life force energy that gives value to those Federal Reserve note negotiable debt instruments. Your life force energy is what is being taxed, if you will,
Through negotiable instruments.
Yeah,
and that
you're
again,
exchanging it for something that has zero value, literally, other
and
than
that
you
again,
perceive it to have value.
and that again is what Rumpelstiltskin and what's her name? She was in life force value, and she was having it stolen away. The other part of that Rumpelstiltskin thing about the name is when you go singing praise about your own name, you get screwed. So keep touting that name. Keep telling everybody who you are. I'm sorry, but I don't know the name. He hasn't called me yet. I'm a child of God. I don't know. You can call me anything you want. You can call me asshole. I'm going to correct you and tell you I'm the whole ass.
It's all negotiable.
Yeah, you can call me a snitch, and I'm going to tell you that's okay because the only one I snitched to is him. So you keep on keeping on. That name is like water off a duck's back to me. So let's continue on. Certain dispositions not taken into account. Oops. See, if you hadn't stepped up at 18 and signed that SS5, it wouldn't have been taken into account. The account was created, but it was never used unless and except for mothers and children that died during birth or after birth or any kind of situation like that where the state had to step in because there wasn't anybody else to take care of it. So for purposes of paragraph 1C, there shall not be taken into account any disposition after the earlier of death of the taxpayer or death of the related person, the child or mom. In a compulsory or involuntary conversion, within the meaning of 1033, if the exchange occurred before the threat or imminence of such conversion, or with respect to which it is established to the satisfaction. See, it's never been taken into account until you turn 18. It was only established to the satisfaction of the secretary that neither the exchange nor such disposition had as one of its principal purposes the avoidance of federal income tax. So the declaration there is that you recognize the person as a taxpayer. You recognize the establishment to take care of the estate in case the above happens. Okay? But upon age of 18, mom and dad were supposed to have been competent enough to teach you how to manage that estate so that you could avoid federal income taxes by making your own declaration of competency. Related person. For purpose of this subsection, the term related person means any person bearing a relationship to the taxpayer. Mom is the only person that bear labor pains in discharging the man to begin with that was then turned around and charged as a taxpayer. Treatment of certain transactions. This section shall not apply to any exchange, which is part of a transaction or series of transactions structured to avoid the purposes of this subsection. So we're not avoiding the purposes of this subsection, which is the agreement of a partnership. But what we're doing is avoiding the federal tax as an officer under administration by clarifying that we are a diplomatic minister of profit unto the nation. We accept the nationality and its conference of a United States citizen, but we are now going to tuck him away in safety so that he is not harmed, and we are going to create our own person. And that is the shadow he will reside in and not be seen or heard.
And that replaces the oath that was assumed that we were to take on the obligations of a public office.
Correct. It's telling them that we're not going to take upon the public office as a ward of the state, but we're coming forth as a prophet unto the nations to steward his word. We are a ward standing in place of his word. Instead of his word, we're going to hopefully pass his word through us in the most comprehensive manner that we can as far as we understand his word. The next one, special rule where substantial diminution of risk. Capitis diminutio minimum, medium, and maximus. In general, again, while using special. If paragraph 2 applies to any property for any period, the running of the period set forth in subsection F1C with respect to such property shall be suspended during such period. That's that 180 days, I believe. If we go back up here. No, maybe not. 2 years. The 2 years. And this is why I explained to them at the DOT when they suspended my license, and I had to let them know it's no longer under suspension. It's just no longer relative because it's been beyond the 2-year contract term. There's no longer a partnership for driving a motor vehicle.
So basically what you're saying there is that if my license was suspended, say 6 years ago, and I never went back to the DMV or the MVD or whatever it is to have a hard copy card, that all contracts are null and void?
Not necessarily null and void, but they're completed.
Okay.
There's no longer a contract. It went to the end of its term, 2 years after its last use.
So is it zeroed out, or does it have to be?
No, there's still credits and all kinds of things on the record that have to be corrected. Again, the taxation on that is still there, and you were taxed on it by the purchase and the sales receipts and gas and all that. And those are all receipts that you could have kept and given back to the Bureau of Fiscal Affairs. But you know, the numitant record will have the decedent numitant record is going to have all of the records that the state has as far as those transactions that lead back to the Social Security number. So even if you used a credit card rather than cash, so the only thing that wouldn't be there is items that you purchased by cash, because there's no way to trace that back in the record. But if you use a credit card, that is actually tied to your Social Security number, so that should be on that numitant record.
Well, Keith, unless, of course, you save every single receipt that you use when you pay for things for cash, right? Because that's a record too.
Right.
Right?
Yep.
Okay.
And I've got a gal I'm working with. She's kept her receipts for like 10 years.
Yeah, I've kept them for like 2 years.
Yeah, and we're hoping we can help her out too. Article 38 of the Libre Code talks about if the owner has not fled, then the commanding officer shall cause receipts to be issued that may serve indemnification to the spoliated owner. And spoliated is the same thing as spoiled. And you were spoiled. You were unclean in your functions. So we continue on, and it says the holding of a put. So you put something in a general deposit. That's the asset. That's a put. with respect to to such property. By holding
Security.
right, the holding by another person of a right to acquire such property, or short sale, or any other transaction. And again, if you don't qualify as signature, this is what's happening. It's considered a 1031 exchange in abandonment, and it doesn't matter if it's not like-kind property in exchange, because you abandoned the property that they were supposed to give you in return as like-kind. So in that abandonment, they can do anything they want with it. They can put it here, they can put it there, they can short sell it, they can quick call it, all kinds of things.
Let me
The
interject
problem.
this real quick also. What is a put? A put is an options contract that gives the owner the right, but not the obligation, to sell a certain amount of the underlying asset at a set price within a specific time. The buyer of a put option believes that the underlying stock will drop below the exercise price before the expiration date.
Thanks, John.
And that's basically what that driver's license is. It's got an expiration date, doesn't it? Anything with an expiration date is such a contract.
Mm-hmm.
They're putting you here, okay? They're putting you here. That's a disposition. It's the same damn thing. Again, I urge you to get the sources and learn the contradictions in the dictionaries. So let's continue on with this last one, because this is the special one. It says special rules for foreign real property. Real property located in the United States and real property located outside the United States are not property of like kind. So I want to ask everybody, do you think that's why they conferred a nationality of a United States citizenship, so they could create a partnership, so now they could exchange like-kind fiat currencies known as negotiable instruments, and they just never taught you how to negotiate?
And claim their property.
And one other thing people need to realize, if you go in for a quote-unquote bank, and you join a certain quote unquote bank, guess what? That just made you a banker, because let's really look at what the Federal Reserve note is. That's property of the Federal Reserve System. So by default, you are now a sub-corporation of that corporate bank, whatever one you chose to, or whatever money entity. And I don't like to use the word money, because it's not real money. It's a negotiable debt instrument, as Keith has told you. And you can verify that by going to 12 United States Code 411. But again,
and 412 and 412.
But once again, we're sitting here and we're contracting to use their products, which again, if people don't realize what that actually means, that gives them rights, because a Federal Reserve note is a private banking script of the Federal Reserve System. And people need to realize that dirty little truth. See, you can contract for value with anything, and I don't care what it is, gold, silver, or for that matter, beads and, flowers for that matter. You sit there and you look at some of the tulip festivals. Whatever somebody is willing to take as an exchange, and both parties agree to the terms and say, yes, I will take this for that, there you have a contract where all debts are quote unquote expired. Now, since you cannot pay a debt, it can only be discharged. What has ended up happening is they have built a system compounding debt again and again and again, where you sign off and create currency through the use of your signature, which they again turn around and monetize at a 10-to-1 ratio, and then turn around and charge you for the privilege of your own signature, which is silly in of itself. But that's the same thing that they did to the United States corporation. It's the exact same thing. They turned around and says, oh, you need money? No problem. We'll give you Federal Reserve notes. You give us your bonds, and then you pay us at whatever set interest rate it is, and then go from there. Well, what kind of logic is that when the United States corporation can produce its own bonds and has? They were called U.S. notes. But again, we don't talk about that either. And certain presidents found themselves on the wrong end of a shooting gallery one day, certain November 22nd, 1963. So, all wars are bankers' wars. You folks are in a war right now. And when you realize just how far down this rabbit hole we've gotten, it's gotten to the point of beyond ridiculous. Now, we can, and listen, I appreciate what Keith does here. It's great work, okay? But one of the biggest problems that I have is the simple truth is the United States corporate employees have never once honored a valid contract in the hundreds of years they've been around, regardless of which version of the United States it is, because there have been several versions because they keep coming in and out of bankruptcy. But the problem is we have gotten to such a point where they have to use the fraud to such a degree, nobody knows what's going on at all. They kept us in perpetual confusion. They did this by design. Now, the rabbit hole, when I started going down it in a very real way, it was about 2015, and in 2016, 17, 18, and 19, and I just, everywhere I went, and I was going down farther and farther, I says, does this not end? And I've been putting pieces of this puzzle together since I was a little boy, so that's another subject matter for a different day, but the point of the matter is, when you're dealing in a world that's built on fraud, where do you find anywhere to build a foundation? And when people like Keith and I come in here and we start talking about all the things that are happening, how it's been set up, what we're actually wanting to do at the same time is we're wanting to remind you two things. One, the system is designed to fail. You better realize that. And two, knowing that if, and I hope you are, you're ready to deal with the consequences of that, instead of accepting whatever new version they produce for you, you build something outside their system. It's that
I think it boils down to understanding who the real party of interest is, and that's all of us. Like, without us being the real party of interest, they couldn't continue their charades of a never-ending cesspool of executive, judicial, and legislative bullshit that plagues the world. That's how I see it in the most basic way. Of course, there's a lot of complications and word magic used in all of it to overcomplicate things and make, double talk things and put double talk into codes and all this bullshit. But the real problem is knowing that we're the ones who allow it to happen as being the real parties of interest in it all, in my opinion.
Well, your
humbly.
opinion is right, Paul, because again, what have we done? And you can look at it from a million different angles, but what have we done? We've turned over to other people not only our rights, but the ability to say to us, hey, we're protecting you. You kind of owe us because we're doing all these wonderful things for you. And we never put them in check and says, okay, now you're overstepping your bounds. Now you're going above and beyond what you were ever authorized to do. Because again, when I sit here and I remind everybody, if you and I go down the street and go beat the tar out of somebody else and steal his stuff, that's wrong. And we go to jail, right? Yeah, well, that's what we do. But what happens when corporations masquerading as governments do it? They call it war, and then it's for dealing with quote unquote terrorism or for whatever. It's all bankers' wars. We all know that. And what is it? It's murder on a much larger budget. It's murder on a much larger scale for profit of banking.
It's murder. It's stealing. It's all done in trust because we don't know who we are as the real party of interest in all of it. That's why the system is allowed to continue the way it is because the people don't know who they are.
Yep.
And Keith talks about it a lot through bringing up scripture and stuff. I've spent many years looking up scripture, and I must say this man's point on with all that. It's just how do you implement that in a corrupt system, and in doing so, correcting the record through paperwork, I guess. Like, I don't even think that you really even need paperwork to actually do this. You just have to have a principle foundation in the understanding of it to really overnight change the world, like collectively. Like, if we can understand the principles of these things, I really believe that, like, within like overnight almost, and I don't know what overnight means like in a time scale, but I can say pretty quickly we can convert this and change this over to a much more positive way for us to move forward as humanity.
Right. And as Matthew put down there, 1 Samuel 7, what matter of a king ye shall have instead of me? It's because we choose these earthly kings and don't recognize that we're actually prophets unto the nations. And this is what puts us into that banker position as a financial institution that acts like a consultant firm, because they consult you and you are firm on your belief. Come out of her.
Well, we also are we are solicited towards that too. Like, our minds are solicited. They're like a commercial they played over and over again. When you see Burger King pop up with hamburgers and stuff, you know it's like second. We're unconscious of it. Like, when we're solicited, when our minds are solicited, we're not even conscious of it at the time. And that needs to be like changed. We really need to be more conscious of all these solicitations that are happening to us all the time.
What happens when you're unconscious? You can't be heard and you can't be seen.
Yeah, you're dead.
What is a person? It's unconscious. It has no conscience or subconscious. So let's look at this next one. This one is from L.I.I.W.E.X again, and it's the simple term bill. A bill is a formal or public writing or declaration of one's claim against another. So when the hospital gives mom a bill, she's supposed to give them a bill in return. It doesn't happen.
It's negotiable then.
Right. A bill may be a bill of exchange. A bill may be an equitable pleading of a claim in a court of equity.
Now here's
not a court of law. Go ahead.
So you mentioned in a court of equity. So that's private, right?
Yep.
So we're dealing with both. We have to understand that we're dealing with both private and public simultaneously.
Correct. The common law, which is public, that's why you have public trials by jury, and it was merged with equity so that you could go in equity with clean hands. Even if you were wrong, did something wrong, equity imputes an intent to fulfill an obligation. So you can repent and say for some God-forsaken reason, I chopped off some dude's leg and he couldn't work. He was the head of the family and he couldn't work. I could indenture myself for whatever period of time. Heaven forbid, it should probably be the lifetime since he can't go back to work. I could indenture him myself to his family to take care of his duties and actually become a part of his family. That is equity. That is consolation, resolution, repentance, and forgiveness, all wrapped up in one amnesty agreement. I'm sorry. I apologize. I won't do it again. Let me show you and prove that I can stand up to your honor by standing in your stead, since I took your standing away.
So equity is basically common law.
Correct. It's
Most
the
of the
ability to
time,
come up with it's the ability to come up with your own remedy outside of a jury before you get taken to court. Matthew 18 verses 15 through 20.
Be careful with the term common law in that sense and equity. I don't like that mixture, and I'll explain why. Okay, because remember, prior to 1933, you had what we would call a common law court of record, which is what we're supposed to have. Now, after the court case in 1938 dealing with Erie Railroad decisions, there were no common law courts of record, okay? There was only courts in equity. And again, after the theft and the enslavement of the American people and stealing of all their property by Franklin Delano Roosevelt in 1933, when he took all the gold and his little announcement right there at his inauguration, today will be a day of national consecration, okay? That was a contract offer for the quote unquote New Deal, and we don't need to go down that rabbit hole. But the long story short, at that time, everybody became an indentured servant and a slave to the state. And they became, what was those words mean? Okay. Today is a day, that's the beginning of the contract, of national. What's nation? That's the corporation masquerading as government. That's not the people, although that argument is that it is the people. And what is the last word? What is that relevance? What is the meaning? That means you're working for the state. Consecration, you're working for the state. And Vatican banking, that's the whole secret behind the secrets. So having said that, since no debt can now be paid, it can only be discharged since that point, now you have to have equity. Okay, there has to be a bouncing of the books somehow, because you can't just walk into a courtroom and put a silver dollar or a gold coin on the table and say, I'm here, I'm paying off the debt, we're done, I'm leaving. People have tried this.
that's why all crimes are commercial. All crimes are commercial, and they're
27
governed.
CFR 72.11, exactly.
So there's only two remedies within that. And I know of one off the top of my head. I can't think of the other one. One is an order to pay, because it's all negotiable. It's all paper. It's all negotiable instrument. It's all negotiable instruments. It's all paper. That's all that the money that we have. There is no gold or silver money. People have to understand that there is no means for you to pay for anything. Like it's all by contract. So if we understand that contract and implement either an order to pay or the other one, I can't think of what that is, a draft or something like. One's a two-party, one's a three-party.
It's a draft if it's a note. It's a promise if it's it's a draft if it's an order.
Promise to pay.
Promise if it's a note. It's a promise to pay or an order to pay.
Yes, and that's how we have to, in my own humble opinion, that's what we have to fully understand because of 1938 and the Erie Railroad decision. Like that aspect of but we're still given the protections of an Article 1 and an Article 3 court. Like, but we have to understand that when we get ourselves in those positions, like we have to understand the principles behind that.
Right. And so when the courts try to give you an order to pay, the logical thing to do, if you know what's going on here, is to give
me a bill.
A like-kind instrument, which would either be a bill or a promise to pay or an order to pay by a directive to use credit.
Correct.
Many different ways to do this.
Correct. That's my understanding so far between listening to you and a couple other people that I trust and I listen to and study with and stuff. So like, this is my understanding, and I just want to, maybe I'm talking too much. Maybe I shouldn't intercede so much, but I want to understand too. And the only way I can do that is through, asking questions or, giving my 2 cents for someone else to, like John does a great job of describing things that, of certain points that I had questions to, or or, whatever. And so do you, Keith. Like, I love both of you and I respect both of you very much. And I think, continue on.
Absolutely appreciate that again. And yeah, John and I are quite alike. And as you see, he doesn't agree with everything and has different things to explain things. And that's completely acceptable. That's what we're here for. We need to discuss these things like this.
We do.
So as we continue, it says, at early common law, a bill in equity was analogous to a declaration in law. This is your private relief law. You have to be able to create your own remedy for your own private relief and make it law, because they are at law. You are in law.
Through an administrative process.
Correct. A bill may also be a statement indicating that one owes a certain sum of money to another, such as an invoice. Like you said earlier, you don't need to do paperwork. You can do it invoice in case you don't get the origins of that. I mean, it's right before your eyes.
And you could do that civilly too. You could bring that to a civil court the same way, right?
Correct. You just have to be on your toes and know the words, terms, and conditions of how to contract it at every point, because they will try every trick in the book.
Of course they will.
Oh, yes, they will.
Because they're scoundrels.
Or an itemized list of charges. Another common definition of bill is a legislative proposal offered for debate prior to its enactment into law.
Is that like arbitration?
Draft. Yes. I was hoping I'd be able to make it through here, but such as a draft of a statute, which is a contract, terms and conditions required to implement before it is enacted into law. And as we all know, or should know, contracts are arbitrary. They are not violations of law, and you can only bring it as a violation of law if at first you have a qualms with your brother in that private contract, that you go to him in private and he denies it. Now you can go after him for malfeasance or violation of trust or violation
fraud
of contract. Right. Mm-hmm. Now you can go after, but you have to be arbitrary first. Okay. This is what the courts are not allowing. They give you a ticket alongside the road. Instead of letting you arbitrate it in private like you're supposed to, it's a contract. They put you in a public venue. That's a violation of contract law. Let them know this requires equity.
And that's when you would appeal it and sue them civilly and go after their bonds, right?
Correct. And that's through the risk management, because you're able to point out the obvious. Hey, if it's a contract, which I know it is, if it fulfills all the elements of a contract and it says on it these terms, which of course are contract terms, traffic citation. Under the Federal Transportation Code, it says commerce means traffic, transportation, or trade, such as trade or business. So it runs full circle. It is commercial. That means it is a contract. Okay?
All crimes are commercial.
Absolutely. So let's take a look at this next one. Oops. Let me get it up here. And we're not going to listen to this whole thing. I do want to run through a bit of it here as he explains his plates. But this guy is Williams, Brandon Joe, like we've been seeing the last few nights. Done a couple reviews on his videos. And this one here is going to show an evolution of his plate process, where he did one plate starting out with the state plate, of course, and then went to various different plates. One is a state national, and worked his way up to diplomatic plates. So he learned about the several jurisdictions along the way. And I'm telling you, people, this is very hard to do. And not only is it hard, but it's dangerous. This is why it's important to learn this stuff and know very astutely what you're doing, so that you can teach these people that are fulfilling these offices just doing their job and need a greater truth in peace, not in belligerent combat style. You cannot argue with these people. They will take a personal affront to it, and they will take that personal affront as an egregious action towards them personally, and they will sick their dogs on you. Be very diligent in being peaceful, reasonable, logical, and of sound mind and steadfast heart.
Amen.
Let me find out where he starts talking about his plates here. Because the first part, he starts talking about all the different things that he's got on his car, which he does through credit extension. And he starts at 8:04, and we're going to run through this from 8:04 until whatever. Stop me anytime.
Will you
I've
leave a
already
link
watched-
for his video?
I will
Down
drop
below.
the link down below. Yeah.
Stock culture's trash. Anyone who knows his cars knows it's trash. License plates that I had when I started studying all this shit. This is back when I didn't realize that I was plating a commercial motor vehicle. Okay. So in 2007, I had these plates up until 2022 when I started studying all this shit. Right now, here is the version of the plates that we talked about in the free course. I forget where, but later in the free course. These are pretty loud, and I've never seen anyone really use them, and I'm kind of relieved because it's just kind of combative, right? This is back when I shot the course videos, which is in, what is it, June? Hey, what's up, man?
We can't hear you, Keith.
Your mute's on.
And so when he talks about the plates here being loud, it's because they're kind of combative. If you look at the codes, those are violation sections of the code. So it's looked at as a threat that you're going to come after them for a claim if you violate them. So again, he's spot on there. You got to come peacefully in good terms, and this is not one of the plates I would recommend.
Back in June, what was it, like June, May, and May and June of 2022, right, when we had these, right? Here's the front plates. So it was, in the course, it was this one and this one. It's cool. I just, I wouldn't, unless you really are ready for some roadside verbal battles with some police, I wouldn't really get it. Then we have these, which came a little bit later, okay?
He had experience.
I don't know if I ever really showed you guys these or whatever, but they're cool, whatever. Now, at that point, this was probably like maybe mid to late 2022, I realized that you can actually get, you can actually do an out-of-state trust registration with South Dakota. And I got some South Dakota plates, and I have some registration sticker. I don't think I have it here. I should have got it for this video. And it basically says, like,
and this is going to be great in our situation if we can wrap this up here on this estate thing. My companion was born in South Dakota, and we've got her documentation right here in file ready to try to hopefully correct her estate. So now that we know this, again, everything operating in trust, that's a private trust unless you're involved in that public trust. And again, that's that salvation of a United States citizen, hiding him from being used in public and keeping him protected. It is a internationally protected person, but if you're in a partnership, then you should protect that person too. That means you quit using the Social Security number, you merge it with a private trust, and use that private trust number in lieu of a name and address.
trust, and then it has my trust name. It says Trustee Brandon Joe Williams on the registration, right? Now, these are technically still motor vehicle plates, but they're underneath the private irrevocable trust. So we're getting there. I'm studying. I'm getting there, right? Then My next version is, this is when I started getting into the private motor carrier DOT. You have the DOT number on the last plate, but this is the first one that I actually put on my automobile. Okay. These were on my automobile in California, in Los Angeles, for probably a year and a quarter, maybe even a year and a half. These are the exact plates, one on the front and one on the back. And I drove around with these, never got pulled over, cops behind me, the whole 9 yards. As you can see, it says DOT number on the very bottom. It looks very similar to a Florida plate, but the way that the background is, it kind of like fucks up the numbers. So it's like, you can tell it's not really that great. And like, if anyone would have like looked kind of closely and they knew a Florida plate, they would notice that there's something kind of strange about this plate, right? It's not the best printing in the world. Never an issue, ever. Never got pulled over, never got asked any questions, nothing. I drive this car, you're gonna see, I'm gonna fire it up. It's fully straight piped. There is no mufflers on this car. It's loud as fuck, okay? So now, I'm going to show you, we're gonna put all these plates over here. And now I'm gonna show you, come over here. So this is the plate on the car now. You have to get down and really show it. This is a fully, so we have the Department of State, which is a completely non-patented. Anyone can use this. I looked it up before I used it because I didn't want to get in trouble for some kind of weird patent. Now, the original diplomatic plates that are available from the Department of State are for motor vehicles only, commercial motor vehicles. If you look on those plates, the Department of State symbol is kind of cocked a little bit, like maybe like 12 degrees. So I cocked it the same way. You have the same red thing, just like you'd have in the United Nations. Then you have the Amnesty Coalition. This is my DOT, private motor carrier DOT number, Ambassador at Large, non-commercial automobile, no expiration, okay?
Notice
Now we're going to go to the front of the car.
Notice the terms that he's using. Those are the international contract terms. Amnesty, diplomat at large, at large, not capitis diminutio maximus or subpartner or subcontractor, but at large, the big boy, the guy that wears the big wig.
It's the exact same plate, but it has a beauty cover around it that covers some of the lower stuff, just as I like it. And it says Shelby on it, okay? Now we're going to start up the car. I'm going to show you. This car is a completely straight pipe, totally insane fucking car. And you're going to stand right here. And I'm going to show you. This is a stick shift car. It's a 6-speed.
Listen, brother, I don't have to give legal notice to shit for a God-given right. No, you don't. But with a military compound that runs every roadway and every waterway on the land and from the sea inward, you damn well better give them notice. Otherwise, they're going to kidnap you. And even when you give them notice, you might get kidnapped. But without the legal notice, you are assumed to be a belligerent non-combatant yourself.
Unless you're a letter carrier.
Right, a belligerent combatant yourself. And by that, they are going to treat you the same as an enemy of the state. You better learn how to give them legal notice, as this man is showing you, a diplomat at large, international. You don't have to.
Which would be the same as being a letter carrier.
Correct. You have a diplomatic post. You can post diplomatic. That is not public. You can diplomatically post in the public, but it is about your private rights, liabilities, responsibilities, gifts, talents, all of that. You have to learn how to bring your that shit out of that public record and resurrect it in a good name.
It has the original TR6060 Tremec 6-speed transmission.
Yeah, a cop would just love to pull him over.
Damn right they would, but not with them plates.
Not with them plates.
In the HOV, high occupancy vehicle lane, I drive wherever the fuck I want. It's loud as fuck. It's totally insane. 800 horsepower. And I drive with these plates. I've been driving with these plates for like
That's built for the track.
2 months, no issues. Cops behind me, everything. Now,
High nine.
the car. Now we're gonna go to the motorcycle. This is a 2023 Triumph Speed Triple 1200 RS. It is absolutely glorious. It is so much faster than that car. It is probably 3 to 4 times faster than that car. This is a bona fide rocket ship death trap. And honestly, I don't even drive this thing that much because this thing is way more exciting.
Tell you what, officer, if you can beat me in a race, I'll let you give me a ticket. If you beat me in a race, I'll take the ticket.
Pay to the order of.
Without recourse, on
Yeah,
credit.
without recourse. Yep, all that.
Way more fun and way more interesting to take around town. Okay, so let's talk about the motorcycle. Okay, so the motorcycle is almost completely bone stock. Okay, the big difference between this motorcycle is, as you can tell, the stock exhaust on this motorcycle went up to here. Now, if you look, there's no passenger pegs on this motorcycle right here. So if you look right up in here somewhere, there's supposed to be a little thing, and then it comes down and it has the passenger pegs, and they basically fold out like this. I took them off because this thing is a fucking death trap. I don't want people to ride on the back of the motorcycle. I don't care. This is for me. This is my spiritual transportation. This is my Harry Potter broomstick, shall we say? Okay. So I took all that shit off. Now the cool thing about that is like, if any police officers want to pull me over, whatever, it's like I don't even have fucking passenger pegs. This is actually a little piece right here. You can come closer with the camera. This is actually on these bikes. This piece is replaceable, right? There's a replaceable passenger piece, and this like kind of cool seat area goes across this entire piece of plastic. You take this off. You basically take this piece out, and there's a little. It's not quite. Is it a Phillips screwdriver? No, it's like a star. They give you the piece on that. You go screw, screw, screw. It comes out. This piece goes click back up, and then there's a full passenger seat that goes click down and then through, and then you re-screw it, and then you pop this back on, right? I don't have that on here. I don't have the passenger pegs on here, and the original stock exhaust, which was fucking huge. It goes way up to here like this, attached to the passenger pegs. All that got taken off because this is not a passenger vehicle. You cannot possibly humanly fucking mistake this as some sort of cargo or property or passenger vehicle. It's impossible. It's not a commercial vehicle. Now, that said, come over here. You're going to be able to see on the back of this motorcycle that I have a plate, but it's like way down here. Now, I can kind of bend this a little bit. I can put it back here. A lot of guys in LA and Southern California, they ride with these. They're called tucked because I don't fucking care, basically. That's the simplicity of it, right? So if you get in here and you can kind of look really closely, someone made me this custom plate. You can get in there as best you can, and you can show up top. It says Diplomat Ambassador at Large. It looks very similar to the one. It has the Department of State symbol here, private motor carrier DOT number here, the Amnesty Coalition here, no expiration here, and non-commercial here. Now, with that said, this bike is almost bone stock. It's got the exhaust. It's got a custom tube. I did the hand tube myself with a little hand computer thing that I plugged into the bike myself, right? I've been fucking with cars and stuff since I was kind of young or whatever, right? Now, this thing is fucking loud.
Too loud.
That's like 9,000 RPM. Let's go higher. That's like 10.
What do you think of that shit, guys?
Awesome.
I love seeing successes, and like I said, the guy went through a series of processes and found out about many different jurisdictions in which you can operate. But he didn't
Well,
want to operate. He wanted the top level, and that's a diplomat at large, non-commercial, amnesty coalition. We're always talking about peace.
That's gangster.
He's right on the one angle as far as being a diplomat. Okay, because remember, the United States Corporation out of Washington, the District of Criminals, is a 10 square mile area, and it's outside of the America that we know, but it's managed to encroach its way onto us. But by default, we still have the right to be a state, national, whatever. Okay. Now, the two things, and I have to preface by saying this, it's all fraud anyway. But having said that, the things that stood out with me is, remember, I'm always thinking legalese and in their little world. You're still dealing with a rectangular item on the back of your vehicle, and the four corner rule says anything with four corners doesn't mean anything whatever's written inside of it. That's issue number one. Issue number two is, again, that was all word art. It was all in capital letters. Okay. So again, that goes against my grain from knowing everything that I know, which is why I preface with everything is fraud anyway. Now, I like his approach. I like it a lot. But again, Keith, what you mentioned a few minutes ago with that other individual, recognize, folks, that just because you got something interesting or creative, and I don't care what it is, if somebody decides to take it to the next level, it's outside your control, and you better be prepared to deal with the consequences. Okay? Now, I've been thrown in a cage before for shit like this. No, not afraid of it. Okay? If you're in the fight, you're in the fight. And you're prepared to deal with those consequences and then turn around to deal with it at a later date with them. But the whole thing is, when you're taking it all down, you've got all these hidden contracts and you've got all this incredible fraud, and all it boils down to is we just want to be left alone if we're not out here causing any harm. It's that simple. And
right. And on that point, again, this guy's on it, and John's on it too. So I agree. And again, yes, you can go around without the plates. But if you do so, make damn sure you got the paperwork on you.
Or understand the principles of what you're doing.
Correct.
Because within the principle makes the law. The principle makes the law. So just understand the principles in what you're doing before you go out and do something that this dude's doing. Like, and it's cool. Like, it, no doubt. Like, he actually did his due diligence, and he worked it, and he got what he was looking for. I just hope that, and it sounds like he knows the principles of what he's doing, and that's the important thing.
Right. And again, notice he went through 5 different jurisdictions on that.
mm-hmm.
Right on. Yeah, that's
All right.
very cool.
Well, and that brings us to the conclusion of tonight's presentation. I want to thank you guys for joining us. It was great. I hope to have you guys back. John and Paul, anytime. I do these shows nightly at 9 p.m. Central Standard Time. I try not to miss a night, but it does happen here and there. But I try to do them nightly, 9 p.m. Central Standard Time.
I know, and I try not to miss them. I just never get online and be a participant. And I'm glad that I decided for whatever reason to do this. I think it's very cool, and I appreciate both of you. I've heard and listened to both your inputs, and I try not to ever miss a show, Keith. And I think you're doing great stuff, man. And I appreciate you both very much. Thank you for doing what you do.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it.
To him. Real quick here, Hoppins, another great brother. Please, or plates of this type are issued for vehicles owned by foreign embassies or official representatives to the U.S. having diplomatic status. And that's true. And Hoppins, he recently boarded a plane with a Bible, evidently for identification, and we hope to see his video on that soon. He did state earlier in another stream that he would be posting a video on that soon. I can't wait for it, brother. I love it.
I can't wait for it either, because I'll be one of the first people to like that one.
Yeah, I'm hoping he'll come up and on the panel and discuss it with us when he does the video. So
That'd be awesome.
kudos to you, brother. I love it. Most people don't have that courage.
Nope.
All right. Anything else, guys?
Good night, world. Have a great night, guys.
Yeah, sleep well.
Listen to this. He's pulling my leg again. You motherfucker. Excuse my language. I should have known better. But see, I have faith in that because I've stated that before.
I do too.
Psalms 121 verse 8, the Lord shall preserve thy going out and thy coming in from this time forth and even forevermore. Along with that, the first article of the Constitution of the Universal Postal Union, which the Constitution of the United States is subject to, states that freedom of transit is guaranteed throughout the entire territory of the Union. This is in reference to transitioning, not transitioning from the man to the person or anything like that, but transitioning from point A to point B, the going out and the coming in, where in the United States says that you're required to have a passport to leave. That sounds like in prison. That sounds
without
like
script or money.
Yep, absolutely. And so on that note, again, hit that like, share, and subscribe button. Folks, I put a lot of time and effort in this. If you feel the need or ability to share some love, please hit that PayPal link. All is appreciated, and it is needed. I operate strictly on a necessity. So feel free to help out with some love there through the PayPal link. And remember, folks, I love you. I don't give a rat's ass whether you love me back. And that's to say, I don't care if you hate me. One day, I hope you will learn to love each other. And with that, may God bless you and have a good night.
Peace out.